Greetings and welcome to this edition of the Global Healing Network. I'm your host, Dr. Kamal Kokai, and today I'm joined by a good friend and longtime colleague, Dr. Stephen Schram. And I want to point out something about Dr. Schram's background at the outset. In 1978, he got his PhD in chemistry. In 1996, he got his doctorate in chiropractic.
Actually, that was
1983,
1983.
right? And in 1996, he got his degree in acupuncture. And he's currently the chair of the New York State Acupuncture Board. And anybody, from me looking at that, this man has actually mastered a biochemical understanding of life, of the body. He went into a whole structural piece that he has mastery of, and then he went to a bioenergetic piece in terms of the acupuncture, and that really makes a fantastic background from which to actually assess problems and help people. So the community is really blessed by the fact that Dr. Schram has been in practice how many years now?
So 31 years so far.
31 years in Manhattan, New York. So, Steve, I want to welcome you.
Oh, thank you, Kamal.
Right.
Glad to be here.
So, with someone with such a broad experience and background, that provides like an interesting interplay for you to have with clients. So I always start off by asking practitioners that join us just to share one or two cases so people get a sense of who you are and how you size things up and approach things. So just pick anything out of your hat and
Okay. I want to start by saying that I like to think outside of the circle. Or maybe that's outside of the box, or what box.
Right.
So I like to be able to solve problems. I always find that puzzles are entertaining for me, whether they were scientific or there's some person's issue. So one of my more recent cases came in a couple of days ago. It was a guy in his 50s, I would say. And he'd been injured 15 years ago by a physical therapist who had him lying on his table. And he pulled down on his leg and injured apparently his low back. And he had spent the last 15 years going to every practitioner, neurologist, orthopedic surgeons, PT, chiropractic, acupuncture, somato-emotional release. And every one of them came up with slightly different diagnosis, but absolutely no one was able to approach his pain. Mm-hmm. So my approach in those situations is to recognize immediately that where his pain is has nothing to do with where his problem is. Well, it makes perfect sense. I mean, if I were to touch his pain, everybody else touched his pain.
Right.
So they didn't get anywhere. I'm not going to be any better at touching his pain because he's gone to the best already. So I kind of recognize that when the physical therapist was pulling on his leg or pushing it down when he was lying on his back, he probably injured somewhere deep in the psoas muscle, somewhere in the hip. And then we know that the psoas muscle is contracted when you're sitting. So I proceeded to have him lie on his back. I went into some very deeply guarded muscles.
I was going to say, man, it sounds painful knowing going to that psoas. Right.
I got about 2 inches in, and he was going, ow, ow, ow. I said, lift your leg. He said, I can't. We worked through that. We took our time. We worked through that. It took about 4 or 5 minutes for me just to assess and palpate. And palpate, actually, in this case, is almost the same as treating, because when you're touching a real painful lesion in like a psoas muscle, you're really treating that. Well, he sat up on my table and he says, Doc, I can't believe this. Something must be wrong. I can't believe this. This feels so much better. Mm. So it's a way of, I have a way of looking at problems, particularly complex problems, that looks to isolate what's going on with the person and try and figure out, is this a complex set of problems that I have to deconstruct, or is it something that somebody else might have missed?
So
So
let me ask you, right? Because within that context, so here you are, you're already a successful chiropractor. You were even an instructor of other chiropractors, right?
that's right.
Why did you add on the acupuncture piece?
Well, chiropractic is an amazingly powerful tool for treating musculoskeletal complaints. But it really is not very good if you want to treat fertility, if you want to treat digestive ailments, some of the more chronic, energetic, psycho, emotional problems respond incredibly well, addiction issues. All of these really help, are helped by acupuncture and by energetic techniques. And in addition, the energetic techniques can totally augment the chiropractic techniques. The dew channel that runs up down the spine. I did a treatment on a patient. Here's the second one. She came in. She had a quadra equina injury, which is, you know, a really serious
Yeah.
injury. She'd had it. It was repaired, but ever since then, things were just not right.
Let people know where that's at in the tailbone, because no one's going to catch quarter equine.
Okay, quadra equina. You basically have lost control of your bowels, your urine. You can barely walk. Severe pain. It's really a surgical emergency response. Get the person to the emergency room. Well, this is somebody who came to me like 5 years after they'd had the syndrome. They really couldn't walk. They still were not very well. I did two acupuncture points, one for the dew channel, one for the bladder channel. You know, on the extraordinary vessels. You know which ones I'm talking
Right,
about. She got up off the table. She said, "Doc, I haven't felt this good in 5 years."
right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's amazing with the acupuncture, how just certain points, when you energetically align people, it's amazing the changes, like the depth of the change that can actually happen. That's
Yeah. It's profound.
fantastic for patient and for practitioner.
And the nice thing, you know, chiropractic's very physical, and as I'm getting, I'll use the word more mature, I seek out less of this physical work and more of the energetic work.
Right. So,
It's a lot easier on the body.
I'm curious because I know that you are a real student of acupuncture. You've gone through, textbooks, and like you really like follow. You try to really understand the protocols and things that were being laid out. What has really impressed you in your study of Chinese medicine in terms of, because it's a totally different approach than allopathic medicine? When you look at the different point combinations and the thinking that people had just to even come up with these things, I mean, what's amazed you about it?
I think of acupuncture almost in the same way as utilizing multiple medicines on a person. A person's problem is never like, "Doc, is it this? Is it that?" No, it's a salad. You've got tomatoes, you've got cucumber, you've got lettuce, you've got oil, you've got
Right.
salt, pepper, oregano. You've got all of these things. And so the complexity of the patterns that you have in terms of treating with Chinese medicine and with acupuncture allows you to utilize each point as if it was a specific medicine for that particular person. And you use those points to turn on that particular patient's own personal pharmacy. So I'm using the body's own biochemical responses, utilizing the signaling system that's present from the acupuncture channels, and combining that with a series of points that work synergistically to tend to address more of the complex wholeness of the problem. For example, people come in with dampness. Dampness is always accompanied by stagnation, so you have to treat both at the same time. You can't treat one or the other.
So you just mentioned two medical terms, dampness and stagnation. Why don't you give people an idea of what dampness and stagnation is, relative to symptoms, so people can better appreciate that?
Dampness can manifest in terms of feeling heavy, can feel bloated, can feel thirsty, and you doesn't get better. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. It can have urinary issues. Dampness is actually a very pervasive problem in our society, I think, due to sugar intake, overthinking. It just is a heaviness, and you don't feel light in your body. You feel just heavy. It's a type of heaviness. And that heaviness is also associated with, as the second term, stagnation. It implies that the energy in your body is not flowing robustly, like a river flowing downstream, gurgling and bubbling all the way, and then it hits a dead spot or spot where it's just filled with slowness and sluggishness and mold and toxic and slime. Well, that's stagnation in that area, stagnation accompanied in this case by dampness.
There are a whole
So,
lot of bellies that correspond to that, and people thinking about their abdominal functioning.
yeah, it's really the core. I'd say, the earth or the core
Yeah.
digestion is maybe the basis of most of the ailments we have in our society. Our guts have really been messed up by how we eat, when we eat, what we do while we're eating. Uh,
And a few well-placed pesticides and other chemicals
yeah, the
doesn't really
pesticides
help.
they play a good role too. The pesticides, the fact that the food we eat is potentially denatured. And I'll tell you something interesting about organic foods. I know you know this, but I'm going to tell this for people that might be viewing it. Organic foods are really better for you because they're a stronger plant because they have to survive without being helped. They don't get the supplemental feedings, the coddling. They have to survive bugs, and when bugs come and attack them, they produce more chemicals that are potentially more beneficial. It's a stronger plant with more energy with it. So that's the benefit of organic. Not to mention there's a lower pesticide residue, hopefully, and it's just a better plant all around.
Well taken. A couple questions as we talk about dampness and stagnation, because one of the practices that really complements acupuncture is Chinese herbal medicine.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious your experiences in that area, because that brings you back to your biochemistry background.
Well, I
Your
also completed
chemistry,
Yeah,
actually, right?
I also completed the herbal program and have a national certification in Chinese herbology.
Why not?
I just couldn't leave that alone. I went back and did herbs, I guess, in 2003, 2006, something like that, about a decade ago. And the Chinese herbs, when we think about herbs, they really are medicines, and they're medicines in the fact, as with any medicinal substance, it pushes your body physiologically. And so the dampness medicines, whether it be the mushroom poria or the bitter orange skin, they help. Well, that's more for stagnation, but they help your body process fluids more efficiently. They help dry the dampness, remove the stagnation. Herbs are a very significant and important part of Chinese medicine, and many of my patients that come in for problems receive usually patent Chinese formulas, but occasionally customized formulas that go along and sustain the acupuncture treatment past the delivery of it.
I
Yeah,
think what's so fascinating to me is that the reference point is nature in matching the function and the use of the herbs to like processes in nature. So we'll talk about wood. We'll the effects of the wood element. We'll talk about dampness. We'll talk about metal. But I mean, when you really think about it, they've made it such nice correlations and metaphorical representations. And it's a little bit different than going into a chemical laboratory and measuring and mixing things that way. And I'm curious because on the one hand, you have a chemistry background, but
yeah.
then you're mixing, and it's more like a kitchen recipe in terms of understanding, the qualities of the different, plants, spices, whatever, than the actual, doing chemistry.
Well, the thing about the chemistry, my specialty was analytical chemistry.
Okay.
So, but really the tools that I took away from the doctorate program in chemistry was actually how to solve a problem. So it's rare for me to look at any Chinese medicine from a chemist's point
I
of
got it.
view,
Right.
more so from a problem solver's point of view. But the other thing that the chemistry background turns me into is more of a skeptic of when I hear people tell me they did something or other, and they say, "What do you think of that?" And I go, well, I don't know. It doesn't really make any sense. You may be right, but there's something that doesn't make sense about it.
Right.
Whether it's a foot baths where people say, "Oh, I put these electrodes in, and all this black tar came out of my feet. I'm detoxifying." And I'm going, well, I had somebody come in with one of those, and they said, "Well, let me try without my feet." And we still had the same black stuff coming out because it was an electrolysis reaction of the zinc and the copper and
Right.
the sodium chloride in the water.
Well, that's a nice show and tell.
Right, right. So,
Well,
I always, even though I'm in the holistic field, which is filled with a lot of dubious claims and pretentious practices, I still maintain a healthy skepticism, and I want people to show me. I want to try these things. I'll do anything. You probably know that about me. I'm very experimental.
well, let me ask you because both of us have been around now for like 30 years out here. I mean, just seeing patients, this is our professional lives. And what have you seen relative to the changes in terms of people's health and the types of illnesses? I mean, what are you seeing? What do you see that's actually changing? And I'm kind of projecting that into the future as well.
I think people are becoming much, much more aware of how food impacts their life and the quality of the food. They're also more aware of the addictions. I seem to be seeing a healthier group of people overall. Now, that may just be my personal vibration or it may be representation of the society. I don't know if I can draw a conclusion from that. I also, as I look around, when I first came to New York, there might have been half a dozen yoga studios. Now they're on every corner, second floor.
Right, right.
So
I,
I think there's a raising of consciousness, particularly within New York City, which attracts a lot of bright lights. I see New York as a more vibrant place with greater light, with greater intensity of living, and I think people are much, much more aware of what quality of life is rather than quantity of life.
well said. I just want to say, Steve, it's always been, I've known you for
Decades.
decades, right? And it's just always been a pleasure just to exchange clients with you and just to see how you work, how intelligently you work. I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to some at least one of the courses you'll be teaching on palpation, the
Yeah.
art of palpation.
Whoever
And
comes into the course, they should bring their own bodies and we'll work amongst each other,
right. And,
palpating each other,
and
because there's a lot to be learned that way.
And this is something we'll be offering through the Global Healing Network at theglobalhealingnetwork.org. And we'll update folks on that. So, Steve, why don't you share some information about how people can reach you?
Well, I've got a website. It's drstevenschram.com with a V. I'll give you my phone number. It's 212-696-4426.
Steve, Dr. Schram, thank you for joining us today. And we look forward just to sharing the word about the work that you're doing and just the work that can be done through these other forms of medicine and healing. Thank you.
Come out, Dr. Kakai. You're an inspiration to all of us.
All right.